Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Lena?
Good. My hair is a little crazy. So Derek Kilmer bumped it to next week, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no surprise there.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to let people in.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, good morning, Kay. Hi, Mark.
Hi there. Missed you last week.
You did?
Yeah, I never got any notices. You crossed me off
No.
your list.
No, I didn't send out a notice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was in the middle of all the grants and then also virtual job fair work. So I was fairly swamped and didn't get out a notice. We did have one. It's always the same link.
Oh, okay. So
Mhm.
don't get rid of it then, huh?
Right. It's the same thing each time. Right.
You're staying busy though, right?
Yes. Uh-huh. A lot of good things going on though, I think. So that's positive. Hello, Commissioner Johnson.
Oh, hello. How are you, Colleen?
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
How's the fishing, Randy?
You in the pond? I mean, where John Brewer and I go every now and then. It was good one week, so what to tell you? At
What's
least
that?
we have a few priorities the same.
Pooh's Pond.
No, it was a different. It's Darrell Woods pond. So
So I am letting folks in. It's not quite 8 o'clock. So I'll hold off just a minute. I'm sure we're going to have more folks joining us. But I have been trying to gather information at the state level, which is very challenging to do, about the president's executive orders. And so there are some opinions, certainly, but not too much that is absolutely certain. And I'm letting Josh Weiss in, the North Olympic Legislative Alliance lobbyist, and he had a little bit of insight too, which if he doesn't mind terribly, I'll ask him to share his perspective. But also last night, there were a couple of announcements from our governor on some programs. As I've shared before, there's about 1.3 billion remaining that the state's holding on to of coronavirus relief funds that came from the federal government. And, we, of course, have been hoping that some of those funds would be allocated to the county and the state, as was directed by the U.S. Department of Treasury. But it's unclear as to whether he will do that or not. But he did make two announcements about $40 million going to a creation of an immigrant relief fund. So it's not real clear exactly how that will be implemented, but it will. Some of the information I found was that in a statement that he wrote, that there's an RFP out for an organization to accept the $40 million to distribute that to undocumented immigrants across the state at $1,000 per person. So for the West End, that has, according to Rod and others, has a lot of undocumented people, that they'll be able to distribute to those folks $1,000 per person. Those funds will be available in the fall. but what that process will look like is still being established. Also, I saw that OFM has distributed $10 million of additional funds to DSHS. So the $10 million will go to cash payments to people that need some kind of financial assistance. And it's not clear at this point what that can be used for, but presumably it'll be for rent and just a broad array of services. But keep in mind, he has only spent, so he put $10 million of state funds to small businesses, and then of the 20 million, actually only 20 million was going to businesses from the coronavirus relief funds. But in actuality, it turns out that only 10 million of that is going to grants for small businesses. Others were, part of that is for contracts to analyze the economy of our state and other contracts associated with businesses in Washington state. So in total, he has allocated 20 million to small businesses, and so far 40 million to 40 million to undocumented immigrants, and 30 million to tribes. And it's surprising to me how little funding has gone to small businesses. But I guess his thinking is likely that that's something that the federal government should be funding. And in comparison to other states, there's been a lot more going to small businesses in other states. And of course, that's my area that I worry about personally, is small businesses. Is the Dale Dunnings of the world.
Yes. I can't believe that. 40 million to undocumented? Jeez.
I'll put a link, and Donna says, good morning. Good morning to you, Donna. I will put a link in there about that. And while I'm doing that though, Josh, welcome. And you like to share with everybody, he did a and I'm going to send this out. I'm sorry I haven't, it was a recap of the primary. So would you mind giving us any update that you have from the Olympia perspective, both on, I think it would be nice, I will send out your report. It was great. I should have done it with the last email that I sent out, and I realized right after I did it, I didn't include that. So I'll send it to all the NOLA participants, but if you want to give any update that you have, that would be wonderful.
So last week we talked about the primary a little bit, and I guess the only thing that has changed since then, right? Votes are still coming in, and actually I haven't looked this morning since last night's update. In the battleground district at the state legislative level have only, let's see, in the 10th district where you had Democrats taking over or being the lead vote getters for, let's see, 2 Republican held seats right now. The Republicans have sort of come back. Commissioner Helen Price Johnson is now behind in her Senate race to try and take that from Senator Mizal, who was just appointed last fall. In the 19th district, where you have 2 rural moderate Democrats behind significantly 2 Republicans, you see them getting further behind. So it seems like since last week, what's happened is the votes that have come in are trending sort of Republican. And there was a very interesting assessment in the Washington State Wire over the weekend. And then actually I just saw Danny Westmead in the Seattle Times had an article about the primary both of them sort of in a similar tone of Danny Westneat's point was Democrats didn't actually do particularly good this election. So I think the question everybody has is whether this, trends forward to the general election. Will Democrats turn out more strongly because of their strong feelings about the president? We'll just have to see. But I guess the bottom line is it doesn't really change. I think I said this last week too. It doesn't really change the dynamic, the control of the legislature, but it does change the dynamic in terms of how aggressive I think Democrats will be in the policies that they pursue. That's kind of what's going on. The big, Colleen, you and I had some conversation about what's going on, the interplay with the executive orders that the president signed last weekend on Saturday. And actually it was only one executive order. The rest were memorandums, was my understanding. I think what you've seen since then, if you've been looking at the media, is there's pretty significant legal question. People are getting lined up, I think, to challenge legally the one executive order. And then for the one that, people have paid the most attention to is the unemployment benefit, which requires, in order for states, it was a $400 benefit, 300 of it coming from Federal Reserve, federal budget, 100 of it was required to come from states. And if states did not provide that additional $100 per week, they were not eligible to receive the federal benefit. And I think it's highly unlikely that Washington will match that or provide the resources for that. And I also think that will be challenged. I think so much of what we're seeing right now is that, whether the governor provides additional CARES funding, what happens with unemployment insurance, everything is really sort of contingent on what happens at the federal level. The governor and the state are really waiting to see what Congress does. And right now, last I heard is that, they're basically on a hiatus on their negotiations at the federal level. So we're really sort of high centered. I don't expect, well, I shouldn't say that. Unless there's some sort of breakthrough at the congressional level, I don't really see any announcement on additional CARES funding at the state level anytime too soon. Now, I'm sure that the governor will prove me wrong and make some sort of announcement this afternoon, but that's just the way these things sort of go. But that's kind of where the trend seems to be right now. Legislatively speaking, in terms of policy work, I think we're seeing there was a lot of work that was going on when we thought there was going to be a legislative special session. A lot of that has really slowed down. There are legislative task forces and meetings going on. There was a joint legislative committee on economic recovery met last week, had an interesting conversation just sort of generally about how the state is faring economically, and Department of Commerce does have has procured a study with some recommendations and thoughts about economic recovery actions that it will be, the director in that hearing said that she would be bringing forward some of those ideas as agency request bills and budget requests this next winter for consideration next session. Racial reform, there's still a lot of work going on that behind the scenes. So those kinds of task forces are still moving forward, but we're not seeing a whole lot of things are slowed down. The other thing, House and Senate both have committee assembly the House has one in September. The House and the Senate have them together in November. The House, for their committee assembly, that's in September, has gone purely virtual. They've spread it out. Usually it's over 2 days. They've spread it out over 3 weeks with committee hearings throughout September. I think we're really starting to feel like the legislature in January is not going to be meeting in person, or at least in some modified fashion. So that's kind of what I know. Happy to try and answer your questions.
So Josh, in January, they won't meet in person, you're saying?
I would be, if they meet in person, it'll be some sort of modified version. I think it's pretty unlikely that advocates like ourselves will be having in-person meetings with legislators. They may be coming together for floor votes, but there's been talk about them even being sort of quarantined in their offices for virtual meetings only. And then I've heard also that the Senate is considering purely virtual, no actual in-person meetings. So it's in flux, but it won't be regular.
Okay. Interesting. Anybody have any questions for Josh?
One question I have is, you talked about the unemployment benefits, the executive order related to that. I'm more concerned about this payroll tax holiday or payroll tax reduction. My concern is, initially in the president's speech, he said retroactive to July 1st. As a payroll preparer, that would be a nightmare. The White House press briefing indicated September 1st. In her presentation, what is the likelihood that this will be challenged, and how does that process work? Should we expect that and prepare for that change in September, or are we kind of at a stalemate at this point?
I wish I could give you good advice. I think we're kind of at a stalemate. I wouldn't be surprised if all of that gets challenged legally. I know that has been, there's been a lot of press about people, congressional Democrats in particular, but also Democratic governors saying they think it's not constitutional or legal. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's challenged. I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you about in terms of preparation.
Josh, going along with Lena's question there, FICA tax, Medicare tax, originally were voluntary. And of course, now they're not voluntary. And this is going to turn around and bite all the employees when it all comes due. So I'm basically advising my clients, Lena, we're going to pay it like we always have, and we're going to pay it in and not take that option. Like I said from the get-go, a lot of my clients didn't even want to touch this because they knew the rules were going to change continually for this.
Well,
I'm very glad we didn't have to.
Yeah, but there's two different things going on, because there is a tax, with the CARES Act, there was a option passed that allowed employers to defer paying the Social Security and Medicare. And I have not encouraged that at all. But this, I think, is something different. And we've had this before back in 2008, 2009, where there was a reduction in the employee portion of the Social Security tax. And that, there's a lot of different issues that come along with that as a payroll tax preparer. And so I'm imagining that it's not, I haven't really read anything about it because I like to wait until everything is set to go before spending a lot of time and effort into figuring out what they're thinking they're going to do. But we have had a short-term reduction. I think it was about 18 months when this happened before, which wasn't, it wasn't a furlough or a deferment. It was a reduction in the Social Security taxes. So that's what I'm envisioning the idea is, and has been since the president has been talking about this issue. But in the middle of a quarter, making a change like that creates a lot of issue related to the tax forms and things that have to be changed. And so it's interesting. It's interesting. And we just have to.
Yeah, as it was, the 941s for this last quarter were all changed. We had to wait for them to be downloaded till almost mid-July before we could file those because of the new form. Yeah, I'm with you there.
And they didn't function quite right sometimes. So with QuickBooks anyway, but.
Yeah, so the president's memorandums and executive orders certainly have not filtered down through our state so that businesses and tax preparers and accountants and bookkeepers can, you know, really make smart decisions about how to respond to that. And I think I'm betting that most businesses won't take advantage of the reduction in payroll taxes on the employee side, just because there's a high probability that that may have to be paid back. And what if someone resigns or quits before, like say at the end of the year, they took that reduction, and then what if they no longer are with the company, and they're no longer working, who's responsible if it's just a deferment to pay that back? That's another question that I would.
Employee.
Would it be the employee?
It would. I've done some reading on it. It would be the employee, so they would get an unwelcome surprise when it came tax time.
Yeah. Anyway, a lot of risk and uncertainty certainly surrounding it. So I think we're just in a wait and see mode, and likelihood is not high that in our state particularly, that will be a financial benefit to people in Washington. And also that, you know, the $400 of federal pandemic unemployment compensation, instead of the $600 being $400, it's what the National Governors Association have said, the different articles on positions of governors, is that it is not something that will be easily supported or implemented in certainly Washington state, that our state doesn't have the $100 per month that they are expected to put forward. I understand the governor of Ohio said that, okay, we'll take the $300 from the Fed, but we're not going to put $100 into it per week. He made that proposal, but I think that isn't going to go very far, and plus it'll be challenged in court very likely.
Colleen, this is Patty Morris. I heard on the news this morning that President revised the executive order to being 300 and eliminating the 100 from the state.
Okay, interesting. So, but that is a big step, a big element. So thanks for sharing that, Patty. It'll be interesting to see, though, how long that would last. From what I'm hearing, it's only somewhere between 1 and 2 months. And so, and I know there's a lot of people, my dad actually has shared with me, he does a lot of volunteer work for St. Vincent de Paul and gets a lot of requests for financial support from people in poverty. And, you know, I think it's fair to say, Dad, that the requests have really increased over the last few weeks since the last check of the $600 per week came out at the end of July. And so, you know, this one thing we're doing, which I think is positive and probably helpful in the long term, is hosting, along with Employment Security Department and our chambers, a virtual job fair on Thursday, so tomorrow, from 10 to 2. And so those folks that are having problems, you know, paying their bills and such because of the lapse of the $600 per week, which again, there's over 8,000 people that have been employees that have received at least one check of $600 per week. They have, now that's gone down to, you know, as low, anywhere from $171 at the low end from the regular unemployment up to $765. And so that $600 was on top of that. And so people that worked at, minimum wage jobs were down at that lower end, and they're the ones that would be more likely needing assistance. They're now back to regular unemployment payments, which don't support, minimal needs. And so we're going to have we max out at 50 businesses that can have booths, and OMC is going to have 3 booths. So because they've got 153 job openings, but we're going to have hundreds of job openings available, and we're trying to get the word out that, hey, you need, and we know we've gotten the word out. If anybody has an email, which if they've applied for unemployment, they have an email. And so we have sent out emails to all 8,006 people that have received unemployment payments to let them know about this virtual job fair, where there are literally thousands of jobs open and available now. So we're trying to connect them. One challenge would be, do they have good internet? And will they have that from tomorrow from 10 to 2? Where we've been sharing that they can go to a library and connect that way if need be. But, Safeway, all Safeways from Jefferson and Clallam County, there's 4 of them. They all have job openings, and deli counters and the like. There's just a lot of the full range, up to physicians that, pay really high wages down to minimum wage positions in food service and retail type positions. So we're hoping to get that word out that there is a solution out there.
Personally, I'm not seeing applications. I've had ads. I can't hire right now. And I've had people turn me down because of the $600 thing. And we're still not seeing. We're just seeing a real shortage of labor here in our industry. And I'm not talking about minimum wage. My starting is $15 to $18.50 an hour, plus for full time I do healthcare. So I can't get applicants for kitchen work. And I know I'm not the only one in that boat right now.
Well, I hope this job fair will give you some good applicants. I mean, they're all going to know about it. So the numbers say that you should be able to get some. And I'm hopeful that it will have some positive effect, Dale. And you do have a booth set up.
Yeah,
correct?
I do. I'm finished setting it up today. I'm curious. I have to run away tomorrow from about 11 o'clock. I'll be gone for a half hour or something. I guess, can I do it remotely on my phone, chat with them, or I haven't?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If I can be in contact on my phone, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's a really robust system. We're excited to be able to have it. I think we're the 6th. It'll be the 6th virtual job fair in the state. And they were concerned that because we were doing just a small region of just 2 counties that we wouldn't have very much participation, but we're having more because they've done statewide manufacturing job fairs and statewide veterans job fairs, those kind of things. Or Snohomish and King County did a job fair, and they said that we've got as many businesses signed up in this job fair as they've had in statewide job fairs. But our belief was that people won't necessarily move for a lot of these jobs. You're not going to get somebody moving from, Spokane to Washington State for a $15 or $20 an hour job, that it's those people locally that we need to have engaged. And also OMC felt strongly about that. And there is also going to be jobs that are available for people that would work remotely. So there are some companies that have signed up that are in Seattle and Tacoma, but they're all remote worker positions where you only have to go in to the city, once every 2 weeks, that kind of thing. So we're really trying hard to get the word out and working well with our chambers to do that. Let's see. Randy, do you want to give any updates on what's happening at the county? Oh, you're on mute.
See, sorry. Yes, thank you. We're as quickly as the county can. I recognize that's not as fast as it should be, but we, of course, got the funding through the system. Again, Colleen, thanks to you and all the chambers for the vetting you did for businesses. I know I would have had a headache trying to distribute the first set of money that went out, or I guess the first from the county's perspective. I know you did that before. And again, I know it's difficult. I appreciate very much also the fact that you paid attention to small businesses. That's the 1 and 2 kind of person business also. Certainly for the daycare, which is going to continue to be a problem with us. I'm glad you allocated funds out for in that area. And again, I know it was a headache. I appreciate you doing that. The one question that you keep asking, Colleen, and that I will keep asking Josh is, okay, is the governor going to sit on that money until October 31st when it has to be dispensed, or what's he going to do? I mean, I keep hearing from the counties, oh, we're at least the Commerce, oh, we're going to allocate it out. But we're sitting here and we don't know. And of course, it kind of, ripples right down because it'll affect you. It'll affect the folks for, housing assistance. It'll affect all the other different areas that the funds are dispensed to. So, Josh, do you have an answer? I mean,
I wish I did, Commissioner. That's right. It's the question that all the counties are asking. My sense of what was going on is that there's the letter from OFM that says that they are going to distribute additional dollars. My sense is that they were waiting, thinking that there was going to be a deal on additional congressional funding. And they were kind of waiting to see what that looked like so that they could match it up and align it with whatever Congress did. Since that has kind of not come to pass, and it doesn't look like they're on hold right now, I guess I would hope that the governor's office makes a decision here pretty soon, because I know that the point that you're making about we need longer than just October 31st to spend the money. They've said they'll move on that a little bit. We need to be making decisions. It's not like it can happen overnight, but I don't have an answer, Randy. I'm sorry. I know that a lot of people are asking and have not gotten answers from the governor's office on that. They're being very tight-lipped about it.
that's what I was afraid of. Yes.
I've asked a few of the governor's senior policy advisors about why it is that they're not, what's the thinking? What are they concerned about? What's the mindset about this money? And one of the reasons that I had not heard before that they offered was that they were not clear, and apparently counties have not shared how they're distributing the $297 million that they've distributed. And, in some counties, like Stevens County, 90% of the money that they received went to small businesses, and very little went to rent relief, very little went to utility relief, very little went to homelessness. And then in other counties like ours, a lot of money went towards those social safety net kind of programs. And so the reasoning that they provided me was that, well, we need to know how the counties have, and primarily counties, because the counties are where the vast majority of the funds, the $297 million went. We don't know how that money was spent, so we're not sure how. We're trying to gather that information, and it's been very challenging. But it seems like maybe WASAC or another organization that's similar to that could ask each county, how have you distributed your money? and then put that into a spreadsheet, send it up to OFM. This is how it's been spent across the state. And maybe that can help inform the governor's office as to how that should be done, you know, how they should spend the funds they have. And I suggested that to them, but.
Well, I will certainly, I'll reach out to Wasack and see if that would help.
Well,
we're sitting here in limbo again. That's the whole problem. So.
Yeah, and I know Wasack has been having that conversation for at least 3 weeks with the governor's office about collecting that data and that information. So I know that Eric Johnson, you know, has been talking with, you know, as high up as the governor's chief of staff about, we need this answer on this question. I haven't heard anything in the last couple of days on that, but I know that that's what they've been working on.
Okay.
And I also know that the association is frustrated, feeling like they have, you know, really been trying to jump through the hoops that the governor's office has been putting up, and they just can't quite seem to get an answer on it.
Thank you. Thank you.
How, Josh, how is Clark County handling they've really been probably the most harmed by the distribution of funding, and that they have a very large population, just missed that 500,000 population threshold to have a direct allocation, in comparison to Spokane County that has 510,000 and received, I think I remember hearing 126 million. How is Clark County, Vancouver, how are they handling not receiving any additional funds?
As you would expect, they are quite unhappy. They have been making that individualized request, including, you know, formal communications from the board of counselors down there. They have not gotten an answer yet. They similar to what all counties have gotten an answer that they will be getting more money, but they don't seem to be able to shake the governor's office loose in actually providing those resources. And I know it's a probably weekly conversation for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be a tough position to be in. Would you say they believe they should receive an additional 70 million?
I think that's right, 76.
76 million. Yeah, that's a big sum.
It's a large amount of money.
Yes.
They've spent it, you know, they've had a huge amount of money they've spent on contact tracing and, you know, actual public health response in addition to business grants, but they are, they have put the dollars they've received already to very good use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I see Lena has an update on PPP forgiveness and EIDL loan payment options. Do you want to go ahead and share that, Lena?
Sure. I've been working with First Federal, and we've been testing their portal for the PPP forgiveness. And I'm waiting for, I've submitted a couple of forgiveness applications. We were kind of waiting for this week in anticipation that the HEROES Act would pass, I think is what it's called, for allowing the loans under 150,000 to be automatically forgiven with certification by the business that they spent it appropriately. But we're going to be moving forward with the forgiveness applications. If the employer or if the business qualifies for the short form, the process is very easy. There will be backup documentation required. I'm imagining that First Federal will be rolling that out to everyone soon. My understanding is that Sound Community Bank will be using the same forgiveness portal. So I think the process will be fairly straightforward for the businesses for the forgiveness. The other piece is I have had some clients receive their first invoice from the SBA for their EIDL loan. Clearly, there's no payment required for 12 months from the date of receipt, but I was excited about the fact that now we know how we can actually make a payment on that. And for any businesses that unintentionally accepted the loan, not knowing what it was, which I've had a few of those, it looks like there is a method at this point to go in and repay those funds if they would like to do so. So I can send you, there's an email, a website for the payment portal.
Great, Lena, if you can send that to me, that would be terrific. I will put that out in a blast email to folks, along with, I'll also do the NOLA update today on a recap of the that Josh wrote on the outcome of the primaries, kind of statewide. And I think the big thing there was an anticipation that there would be a blue wave across the state, and that really didn't happen like some had predicted. A lot of the same incumbents will be going, like it looks like, going back to Olympia, that there's not a significant change in representation across the state. Another thing that we've been working with the EDC that Randy alluded to and that I put in a recent email is that our grant selection committee for the lifeboat grant has done a lot of work, and we really appreciate all their volunteerism and support in the process and thoughtful review. And we do have a list of businesses that have been selected to receive grant funding, and it ranged from $10,000 to for the larger businesses that had more employees, to $1,000 for some of the businesses that are single, sole proprietors. And so we are I'm in the process of informing all the applicants that, did or did not even qualify, because if they have not paid their LNI, if their LNI account is not up to date, then they can't qualify. And one of the things we have to check on is that they are currently qualified. So I have to, look at each one of these applications that we're proposing that we award funding to make sure that they do qualify and that they have paid their LNI. So we're trying to get people to put that as a priority so that in the next round that we'll be doing later this month, we want them to have that paid up so that they can actively compete. And we want to make sure that if they receive any funding, that's the first thing they pay, so that we don't get in trouble with the state. But I am notifying all those businesses. There were over 200 that applied, and in total, there's 50 businesses that are receiving funds that are not childcare. We've got 11 that are childcare, 8 that are nonprofit, and 50 that are for-profit businesses, small businesses that are not childcare businesses. So, and those funds can also be used for payroll. So we're going through the process of informing them and getting that contract put together and making sure it's exactly what the state and the county want to see, to make sure it adheres to all the guidance and rules out there without being too overly burdensome. But that's where we are. And so, I kind of have it's enjoyable to tell the businesses that have been awarded funds that they are getting funds. And then it's also sad. I get the job to tell the businesses I'm making those phone calls, letting them know that they weren't selected, but they'll be looked at in the next round as well. So that's what I'm doing this week, along with the virtual job fair. So I see Lindsay is on our call as well from the city of Port Angeles. I don't mean to tag you without any notice, but Lindsay, if you're hearing this, do you want to give an update on what's happening in the city of Port Angeles? Or we also have Mike Reichoff on. Maybe Mike could talk about some things that are going on at SBDC. I see Lindsay's coming on.
Hey, sorry, I pulled me away from doing some dishes while I was listening to this great conversation. So yeah, we did not have a city council meeting last night, but the previous one we did authorize more funds for mortgage assistance, rental assistance, utility assistance, which is probably similar to what I said last week. Is our general theme has been that the more that we can keep people in households and keep small businesses ready to reopen or going, the easier it's going to be for people to start up once we're out of the more critical phase of this pandemic. So we're trying to keep people from going insolvent, basically. And of course, that's a balancing with the city, its own fiscal sustainability, because we are dipping into our own reserves to do that, with the attitude that we are one community. And you look at how the city gets revenue, it's a lot of it's from sales tax and property tax, and if people aren't paying those, the city doesn't have the revenue. So we're really tied into the overall economic well-being and community well-being here, and that's why we're doing that. Bigger picture, it shouldn't be the city doing that. I mean, I think we should see federal revenue relief and stimulus that we're to the extent that we're seeing it, it's not at the scale that it needs to be. The state isn't able to do the same thing. The state doesn't have monetary sovereignty the same way that the Fed does. So the state's going to be looking at its own balanced budget coming up. I believe the state legislators are planning on dipping into reserves to get through this year. But they're going to have to start looking at balancing the state budget, and they can't do it with all the same fiscal tools that the federal government has. So then the state, allocates money down to the local level through the counties, and so, and to some extent through the EDCs. And so that's kind of the local government partner. So in some ways, we're watching what other governments are doing and trying to fill a gap. But I think if anyone on here is seeing areas where like the city hasn't waived a fee for businesses, or there's something that you're seeing that you have to pay to the city that just doesn't make sense right now, like reach out to the city council, council@cityofpa.us, or the city manager's office or other staff if you're connected with them, and just say, hey, is there a way to waive this fee or stay this fee? And we're willing to do whatever we can to help people figure out how to stay afloat. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So Lindsay, as I understand it, currently you have run out of any money for utility assistance for individuals or businesses, and you've run out of funding for rent assistance or mortgage assistance. Is that correct?
No, I think we reauthorized more funds last week. But if you have more current information, I mean, if that got tapped in the last week, I haven't been up on my email then. Our goal is to not run out of those funds. We're working with the county to set up a system. Happy to talk with Randy more about that. But
Looks like you froze there on us, Lindsay. I see Bruce Beckett is on with us too. Hi, Bruce, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm sorry I'm really late, but thank you for having.
Yeah, so everyone, Bruce Beckett is, for many years, he worked with the restaurant and hospitality industry as their chief legislative affairs director. I don't know if I got your title exactly right, Bruce, but he also represents the Port of Port Angeles in advocacy work in Olympia. Is there any updates that you want to share, Bruce? We do have Josh on as well, and he gave a brief update, but anything you have that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I think one thing, Colleen and Josh may have already shared it, is the two of us have been doing a little bit of research on the broadband issue, which was surfaced by the Port of Port Angeles Commission as, you know, it may not be the highest priority for the port, but it's a high priority for economic development for the region. So Josh may have already reported on it, but we've been doing some snooping into that issue and learned a lot from the people that were heavily involved in the debates over the last couple of years about funding the governor's broadband office, and some of the sort of political dimensions about, you know, getting broadband service into some of the rural areas. And Josh, you might want to add to that. That's maybe, Colleen, maybe that's all. I'll stop there. Unless there's a particular item you'd like me to cover.
No, that's great. Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, we, of course, the port led a curb application. We received $50,000 from the Community Economic Revitalization Board for a study, and there was matching funds, 25% matching funds provided by the county and the cities and the port. So in total, I don't know, what, 76,000, something like that for the study. We, at our Port Commission meeting yesterday, we all agreed that we really want to see the results of that. We don't want COVID-19 to delay the results, and that is kind of what we've been hearing thus far, because, you know, part of the requirement in the RFP was to have a convening, and of course, this occurred before COVID-19, and we don't foresee any convenings being allowed, but we could do a Zoom convening, though that is kind of contrary to, you know, how do you do a Zoom convening and have people be able to speak that don't have good broadband? So it's fairly contrary, but that, in our view, is overweighed by the fact that there's going to be funding available, but it won't be enough to service every county and all of the needs across the state. And if we don't get our study done, we won't receive any of the funding. So we would rather have an anyway, the study's going to be imperfect. I mean, no study is perfect, but we will do our best to try to reach out to folks that are familiar with the broadband issues in communities at the West End primarily is where there's absolute lack of service in some areas, but there's also not good service in Sequim areas and in around Port Angeles. You know, I have the best service I can buy, and it's about 17 megabytes per second. So I've got to make sure everything else is turned off when I do a Zoom meeting. You know, phones can't be on Wi-Fi and the rest. And I've got 2 boys that are going to be back in college classes here shortly, and I'm trying to figure out a solution for my house. So anyway, so it's, you know, even around city limits, it's a problem in Clallam County. So we want to see the results of that study from the consultant that was hired sooner than later, and not have it delayed. And so
it's really fortuitous that the study is underway, Colleen, and I'm really glad that the port applied for that about a year, or September of last year, and the study I think is slated to be done at the end of the year. But you know, I think you're right. If it doesn't get delayed for any reason, would be very helpful. I think one of the things Josh and I took away from this research is, you know, there has been in other parts of the states kind of a disagreement between the private providers and the public infrastructure builders, if you will. And maybe that'll get lessened by the need for service because of kids now needing service for school purposes. You know, that's sort of a new factoid. And the other thing, at least from a port perspective, is the money that's been appropriated for broadband development has been appropriated through the Public Works Trust Fund. And at least from a port perspective, they're not eligible to apply for grants or funding via that entity. So it could be constraining on a port's ability to be the lead in infrastructure development in terms of broadband, but those things can always be changed over time. So Josh, what do you have to add to that? Because you've been doing a little bit more research on it.
Thanks, Bruce, that was good, and I appreciate you bringing it up. Since you and I talked with the ports, I was on a call yesterday. The cities have put together a subgroup that is working on this issue as well. And I think they had a presentation, well, more of a conversation yesterday with the lead in the state's broadband policy office. And he came from Colorado and Wyoming also as well, where he was working on broadband issues. And it was interesting, his perspective, seeing municipalities get very engaged in this issue, the difference between what happened in Wyoming and Colorado, where basically they were not engaged. And he really sees that as a very positive step, and sort of to Bruce's point about maybe changing the dynamic on this fight between the private providers and PUDs and ports about providing service. The fact that, and I'm hearing from my state clients and county clients as well, that broadband delivery is a high priority for them. And I think there's a lot more just general, from school districts as well, just a lot more general public interest in seeing broadband expanded that will provide some additional pressure in the opposition to allowing public entities to provide the service, which he really sees as a significant change in the dynamic. So I think the other, the thing that Bruce and I learned is that it seems really unclear exactly what the request is right now. We know the legislature is going to be doing something. Bruce, I really heard yesterday that it sounds like Senator Carlisle is really going to be trying to sort of hold the momentum on this, which I know is going to be a struggle with Senator Wellman. So there's going to be some tussling in the Senate, and then probably between the Senate and the House about who gets to lead this issue and what the priorities are. But it's very unclear what everybody wants to do something, but nobody's quite sure what that something is right now. And so, it's a little bit hard for entities like us to really know what exactly we're advocating for, other than we need broadband coverage and we need more money spent on it. And at least from a city perspective, don't just take money out of the Public Works Assistance account, which would otherwise be going to needed public infrastructure to fund broadband, come up with a different fund source for this, but it is still important. So.
Colleen, this is Kay. I was wondering, is there a way to get a in-process review on this study? I mean, I think it's really important, and I'm thinking that it would be nice to get an interim review of what they're looking at, what they're finding, and versus waiting till December. And I agree that a virtual review would be just as good as an in-person, even given the fact that some people don't have access. They could go to a hotspot or something like that.
Yeah, and like the city of Sequim has a broadband action team, and a lot of those people that are in that group don't have very good access, but they certainly can receive an email, and then they could go during that virtual meeting to a library or some other location to engage in that discussion. And so I think that's a good idea. It's not part of the RFP. It's being led by the NODC, the North Olympic Development Council. So, and she has said that she thinks it would be delayed because of this, but you know, our commission formally yesterday said, nope, we want it done. And so we're providing that direction, and the contract is through the port. But also I see Patty Morris on the call, and I'm excited she joined us. In the primary election, she was the lead candidate going forward for a PUD position. And this is something, talking to, I've got both Jim Waddell, who's a PUD commissioner on our EDC board, and also William Armacost, who's the mayor of Sequim. And I've had conversations with Charlie Bush, who is the city manager of Sequim, and they all feel, well, the people from Sequim feel very strongly that they'd like the PUD to get more engaged. And, you know, the PUD wasn't a contracted partner of this study, but the PUD owns broadband, and this is an equity issue, this is an educational issue, and the PUD is a public district, and it's the logical entity to, in my opinion, to be leading this effort. And again, as Bruce mentioned, the Public Works Board has funding that is available for broadband, but ports aren't allowed to access that account, those funds. So we want to try to really get the PUD to be more engaged. And I think Karen Affeld from the NODC has had some positive conversations with the port staff, but with the PUD staff. And I'm not really familiar with exactly those conversations, but I know we would really like to see the PUD actually be in a leadership role in this space.
Well,
Patty?
I do. I have a couple of comments related to it. Actually, the broadband happens to be something I'm very familiar with because I did a lot of the permitting for most of the broadband companies over the past several years. Maybe since 2009, I did CenturyLink, CenturyTel, Wave. I did the PUDs, a lot of their permitting. And so I'm familiar with a lot of the networks that are out there because I've permitted them. One of the things that I think is key to the broadband solution is that we need to map out what the backbone infrastructure is that exists, because there is quite a lot of it. When they mentioned the issue with private and public entities, that is a big issue. And Sequim, PUD put in their pilot broadband network, which exists, but they are the wholesaler, not the retailer. So it's up to the retail companies to provide reasonable rates for people to be able to connect to that network, because it is a very healthy network in Sequim that exists. I asked at the commissioner meeting on Monday what happened with their pilot Sequim project, and they said they really it's not being utilized, and it's not made them any money for sure. There's also the network that was installed by CenturyLink years ago from federal dollars out to Forks, made the whole loop through Aberdeen and back through Olympia, which exists out in that area. It's a very healthy backbone that exists today, but you have the same issues, the public and private, and what someone's willing to pay to connect to those networks. Now, La Push, I was part of a study for CenturyLink back in the day to get out to La Push and Nia Bay, but they could not. The issue is people want broadband, but they don't know what they need. There's a gap in trying to get to a customer level of what's necessary, what they really need, because everyone just says, I want broadband. Well, specifically, what is that? And then trying to come up with some rates to get to a home, because building, I think the history here is that building the infrastructure is not solving the issue of getting broadband to the customers. So that's my 2 cents on it. At the commission meeting, PUD commissioners meeting on Monday, they said they were going to be submitting for a grant to look at infrastructure out to the West End. And so there is, I believe, a Department of Commerce grant that they are looking at to apply for to try to get it. Now, they did say at a prior meeting it was $20 million to get the infrastructure in out to the West End. So it is a significant amount of money that they have looked at for that. But anyway, that's, you know, where I'm at with it. And I think I was involved in a Jefferson County study when NOAANET got the significant grant monies to put in. By the way, the West End was asked if they wanted to be provided or be involved in that particular grant. And at that time, they chose not to. But what happened in Jefferson County is sitting in on all those of getting to the businesses. We had that gap of what does a person need and what can they afford to pay for. So that became the real issue is, you know, how much can a customer actually pay in order to get to that particular home. So anyway, that's where I'm at with it.
Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, I think it's a fair recap is that some areas don't have it, some areas have minimal, some areas have a lot, but the anecdotal information I received from OliPen was that and there's the equivalent of an 18-lane highway is what was explained to me in some areas, but OliPen had shared that they can't get anybody to hook up to the PUD network within the city limits of Sequim because the payments would be several $100s per month. Correct. And so people don't choose that amount because PUD expects a certain amount just to get connected. And so that, you know, it's all sorts of different levels of service in different it is available in different places, and the costs associated with that are vary widely. But you know, one thing that I've been trying to understand from the PUD that I haven't gotten is what is their expected return on investment for fiber, excuse me. What is their, like, do they expect to be paid 100% of the investment up front, or are they willing to recoup those funds over 7 years? What is that policy of the PUDs? And I have not been able to understand that because we want to use that information to compare what else the port might do if the PUD is not going to step in and fill that role.
And where they have limitations is they are governed under RC 54, which says that they have to recover 100% of their costs. So it makes it difficult. Broadband, of course, was not something anticipated when they did the legislation for PUDs. The broadband is something that has been added that they are allowed to do, but nothing has changed as far as them being a cost recovery agency where, you know, they can't do gift of public funds. So there'd have to be some creative way to do that, or some, you know, grant funds that would help to assist with that. So
did the PUD pay for the infrastructure that was installed, say in the city?
Yes, yes, I believe it was all paid for by the PUD. I'd have to go back and look at that. I don't think they received any funds to do that.
I thought it was funding that they received.
They may have. I'd have to go back and look at that. But one of the things that they were doing also, which was a benefit, was connecting the substations with SCADA to be able to electronically know what's going on at those. And so they did incorporate that into the project, which I think they're looking at doing on the West End as well, as part of the reasoning to be able to get out there. So if there's a need by PUD and they can substantiate that, then that would add to the benefit of it. and offset some of the costs.
Mm-hmm. So I know we're really getting into the weeds on that, but maybe.
Yeah, I'm a weed person in that broadband.
Which is very valuable in this topic.
Yeah.
Because it is so complicated and the rest. But I see we're after 9 o'clock here. And so is there anybody that wanted to provide a last minute update before we sign off? Okay, if not, I am going to go ahead and end this. And Bruce and Josh and Patty, if you guys wanted to stay on and talk any further, we can certainly do that. But I'll go ahead and call it a morning for our chat with Colleen. And I appreciate you guys being here. If anybody else wants to stay on and listen to anything that we continue to talk about with broadband, feel free to. But yeah, Patty is a wealth of information, obviously, about broadband in Clallam County. And, you know, one thing I wanted to bring up is that Kitsap PUD and Mason County PUD gave presentations at statewide economic development seminars and talked about how they were able to provide a lot of broadband in their communities, even with the RCW restrictions around, you know, gifting of public funds and that kind of thing. But I asked them, how is it that you guys can do this and our Clallam PUD cannot? And basically the answer was, your Clallam PUD does not want to. There are methods, there are ways that this can be done. And certainly Kitsap PUD got a state, some legislation passed for them to be able to provide internet to the home, which is unique. But Mason County, that doesn't have that allowance, also is doing a whole lot more than what our Clallam PUD has been engaged in the past. So Josh or Bruce, do you have any specific questions for Patty, who's obviously pretty darn knowledgeable in this space?
I mean, I guess I would just say, you know, I think it would be helpful to know, and I'm assuming that NOLA is going to want to prioritize this as an issue for next session. We'll see. It would be helpful at some point to know specifically what policy or budget change we would need in order to help the situation in Clallam County. And I don't know if there's an answer right now.
I think that's a really good point. You know, I think because there is going to clearly be funding from the state and there's a lot of focus on broadband as a potential solution for improving the economy, but also from an equity standpoint, there's going to be, if there's funding, it's going to be pushed in that arena. And also I wanted to share the fairly recent conversation with Representative Theringer, the Capital Budget Chair. He felt that he was going to be a decisive voice around broadband as well because of his position with the capital budget. So I know you are kind of describing the political landscape of this space being very complex and undecided, but that he's another element to add that he thinks, you know, this is his arena because of his position as capital budget chair.
There was something that came up in Josh and my research that I don't really understand, and that's pretty par for the course. And Josh, let me see if I have this right, is that in order for an entity to access federal dollars, and there's noise outside my window, so I apologize if that's coming through, they need to have retail authority. Remember that term? Now, from a port's perspective, you typically don't want to be retailing to the individual customer. You're an infrastructure provider. But this is an issue apparently that's a kind of a, you're qualified or you're not qualified to access federal money if you are actually someone with retail authority. Is that how you took away from that, Josh?
That's exactly what I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing that I don't really understand very well, Colleen. The other thing was, along with your comments about Representative Theringer, your good friend Senator Wellman, you know, is considering a broadband package connected to a tax proposal, according to, you know, folks I've talked to. It sounds like there's lots of people trying to get their nose under the tent on this. And one would expect that, but so I think we're all going to have to be sort of just mindful of that.
One lens that she shared with me around broadband from her perspective and the direction they were headed was that they were going to direct that every student that was a person of color the state would pay for broadband to get to their home. And I said, I've got concerns with that because so in Clallam County, a lot of the people of color and the children live in city limits, and that, you know, in trailer parks, in Forks as an example, but it's within the city limits. And there's already broadband in Forks at the city limits. The issue is, you know, the cost to connect, that it's got to be affordable. But then that also leaves out a huge population of people that are Caucasian and poor that won't have access, and they, you know, it's much more expensive to get them the broadband. They live much further out and are much more remote, and they're not going to have broadband access. And I that's obviously a generality, but, you know, the tribes, yes, and now, as I understand, the planner for the Makah tribe is on our board, and they've got a system now that they've received millions of dollars for their program for broadband. It's actually through cell towers, but they are now installing those cell towers at the Makah reservation. So they're going to be covered. They haven't been, you know, in the residential areas, a lot had dial-up, and there were very few connections through CenturyLink. But, you know, one other potential solution that seems like just a shame is that the schools have their K-20 connections, and that are really strong, you know, gig connections. But because of gifting of public fund rules, you can't connect a residential area that might be right next to the school can't use that cable because it's considered a gifting of public funds, though there'd be plenty of broadband availability for a residential area right around the school, that it's only the school that can use it. So it seems like that could be a potential solution to, you know, the line's already in, the money's already been spent, there's excess capacity, and allow, you know, communities that live nearby to use that excess capacity in that K-20 connection.
And there is, in my opinion, well, when we were trying to do the West End study before, and CenturyLink, I was trying to make a business case because I did all of CenturyLink's work all across the state. And I was trying to make a business case to get out to the West End. And so what we were doing was we were taking, because all the information is proprietary, none of the providers want to show where they have networks. And so what I was doing is I was taking the maps that I had, because I had all their maps, and I was taking Wave, I was taking CenturyLink, and I was overlaying where there was service and how much service there was, to see if you couldn't get some partnerships going between the entities to look at, instead of everybody just building their own systems, to look at some sharing of networks. And we got quite a ways into that. And then, of course, where we stymied was with the amount of money that was going to need to finish the sections out there. And at that time, the tribe, Makah tribe, was really pushing to get something built out that way. But if you look at the maps, there's a lot of overlay of systems. And you almost need to set up a rural broadband network where everybody gets together with what they already have and see where you have the gaps. Because you got a lot of service out there, it's a matter of price. And if you could get together and figure out a way to subsidize some of those prices on the West End for a rural broadband rate, where, you know, it just, there's ways to do it. But we first have to define who needs service and what kind of service they need. And then we need to look at a way to come up with a reduced cost, because anything on the West End is going to be expensive just because of the cost of getting the services out there. And so recently I pulled out all my maps because I've never gotten rid of all that. And so I've looked at, you know, where CenturyLink at that time, the last time I was doing the permitting, where their systems were on the West End, what the system was that the feds paid for, because to me, it's kind of a crime of having all that federal paid for network out there and it's not 100% being utilized. And so are there some ways to further, you know, because they are required to provide service. They had dark fiber that was put in, allocated by the federal government to get service on the West End. And so that needs to be kind of, you know, dusted off and looked at again. And then look at where the gaps are out west. And then, like I said, you need to have a few sessions. It's hard right now, but with citizens out there, some focus groups on what is it they're needing. You know, you've got some business customers and you've got residential customers. You need to divide them into groups and have some discussions with them at a level where they understand what they need, because, you know, it's like, I just need it, but what is it you need? How much? You know, what are you trying to do as to what kind of capacity you actually need at the home? And then you can kind of look at, well, you know, what does it take to provide that to them? Because what we tend to do is just build infrastructure, and we've got the gap of getting to the customer, and there's lots of capacity.
Patty, has the consultant that NODC, the team hired, contacted you to get information from you?
No.
And to be able to provide that?
Sure, I'm happy to help any way I can, but no, I haven't heard from anyone.
Okay, I will try to, or maybe I'm going to talk to John Nutter and ask him to talk to Karen that will then.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to help. I've got a lot of information from doing all the permitting for WAVE and PUD, and I've got a lot of the infrastructure of what's existing. And they
I'm going to have to drop, but John Nutter emailed me the other day that he was attending an NODC meeting, maybe with you in a week or so. But it sounds like he might be the right person to make that suggestion.
Yep. Well, I will ask John to make that introduction and get the consultant that was hired to connect with Patty.
Hey guys, this is John here. Yes, I'll definitely do that. I'll actually reach out to Karen Appel this afternoon and make sure that that's on their agenda.
Yeah, you're so anonymous being just John. I didn't know which John that was. You're a little tricky.
There's somebody lurking out there.
I know.
Got up late this morning, haven't taken a shower yet.
You can make
your drop truck, Colleen.
But okay, Bruce.
I need to run too, Colleen. Good conversation though.
So I'm really glad John is on the call. So Patty, would you put your email address in there so John's got it so he can make sure that the consultant connects with you?
I think he's got it, but I'll get it.
Yeah, I'll just.
And I'm working on grants for the EOC, so.
And who is John?
John Nutter is the Deputy Director of the Port of Port Angeles, and
Oh, okay.
he's kind of handling all operations and this kind of issue.
Great.
He's a good dude.
Good. Well, wonderful. Thanks. It's great discussion. It's so important. We need, it sounds like we really need to define the broadband needs for, you know, a very diverse set of customers. And is that covered in the scope of the study? Do you happen to know, Colleen?
So I did, yes. So part of what they're trying to assess is where is the broadband currently? And John, do you know what that process is that the consultant, I mean, I put them in touch with the broadband, the state broadband office, and what's his name, Russ Elliott. But Karen didn't think that his approach was the way to go, and she went with the contract and contractor that she felt was more appropriate for our needs. And so I didn't understand her version and vision of this. I mean, what Russ was sharing was kind of straightforward. And do you know what
No,
that, you don't, yeah.
It has not been as transparent of a process as I had hoped for.
Well, I like Patricia's got maps. I mean, that's a great place to start. And, you know,
Yeah, they're a little bit dated, but yes, I do have quite a lot of the.
they don't jump around too much on their own. So I like that idea.
Yeah, they don't.
And, you know, about 3 years ago, we asked the PUD Commission to have a joint meeting with the Port Commission. 3 years ago. And we asked them, you know, hey, where is broadband? And is there a partnership we can do? And, you know, and they, Sean, I think was his name.
Sean Delplane.
Delplane provided a presentation on where they had a map of where PUD broadband existed. And a lot of it, you know, was through towers and this kind of thing. And so that was good information that we started with, but the PUD really didn't want to continue any further conversations with us.
And I think a lot of that has to do with NOAANET, and that's who the PUDs have invested in for doing that kind of work. And so I think, you know, that isn't quite where they wanted to head now, I don't think. But they do still have the issue with NOAANET being their fiber providers.
So PNNL, Charlie Brandt, who used to be run PNNL, he said that they have NOAANET right, you know, to their property. And he said the cost associated with hooking up to NOAANET was so expensive that they did not do it. Instead, they built their own gig line, and that, you know, NOAANET got, well, all the PUDs that own NOAANET got ARA funds. And then they're trying to charge so much money that it's sitting in the ground and it's not being utilized.
Correct. Yeah, there is an issue with NOAANET.
And so that's just crazy.
Yeah.
That, you know, instead of not using it and trying to charge an exorbitant amount to use it, you know, have it be utilized at a reasonable rate so you have some income.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. NOAANET's a whole other story, but that is, all of the PUDs have NOAANET as their fiber provider. So it does get interesting. It is a very, very spaghetti weave.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for being on. And
Thanks so much.
Wave Able instead of Wave Cable. Thank P. Morris at Wave Cable.
Oh, yeah. It's sorry.
But yeah, John, if you'll take care of that and keep me out of it, that'd be great.
Okay, will do.
Yeah, I think he knows how to get me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. Do you have anything more? We are having a childcare booth tomorrow, so hopefully I've got a lot of work to get that put together today. All right, see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.